Today I made the best pancakes that I think I've ever made in my life. And the reason they were the best is because for the last 4 or 5 batches, it's been a long run, they've been terrible. I make them from scratch, and I've been doing this for a couple of years. And I checked the recipe the first time, and then I've sort of haphazardly created it and recreated it. And nothing is precise when I cook or when I bake now. And so I thought after the first couple of failed attempts that I got the measurements way off. And so I started tweaking things, and I thought perhaps it was the gas. So I started playing with the temperature, and finally I literally was at my wit's end because they were practically inedible, gummy in the middle, and nothing was working until I had the insight after I was researching it to try to understand what was broken in my cooking. I had the insight that it might be the baking powder. And what's funny is that the baking powder is not expired. And I've never had issues with baking powder before, so I didn't know how to identify this as the problem, but I decided on a whim, because I've literally tried adjusting everything else. I decided to remake him. Fresh ginger, grated fresh ginger pancakes with cinnamon. And this time they came out fluffy and delicious and perfect. And my God, they were, I think, the absolute best that I have ever made. And we have 2 life lessons here. I love daily life and what it can teach us. The first life lesson is sometimes the expiration dates are irrelevant. So you could have a product that is actually bad, but because you see the date on it, psychologically, you tell yourself, well, this can't be it. This is not the problem. Similarly, when we are manifesting or using techniques of those or ascended masters who have come before us, those who have been at the journey for a lot longer, we just assume because it worked for that person, it's supposed to work for us. It's similar as the expiration date. When we see teaching that is working for a group of people, we just automatically assume that we're the same. For example, a lot of people teach visualization for manifestation practices, but there are a certain subset of people that don't have the same visualization skills. It turns out that perhaps they need a different technique, and that although they could use the traditional visualization techniques, there might be other ones that have higher efficacy for them. But we just carte blanche assume that this is the way because we're all human. And apparently we are psychologically homogenous enough that we don't ever have to consider that there should be multiple published ways. And this can be kind of a consciousness trap where a lot of people fall into this mindset that something must be wrong with me if the teaching isn't working, versus seeing the expiration date and saying, I know it's not expired, but I think something is wrong here. And changing it up and finding out that sure enough, all it took was replacing something in the recipe. And then it just flows, creates the most delicious, fluffiest pancakes that you've ever had in your entire life. Life lesson number 2. Things really do taste better when they're not guaranteed. I don't mean food scarcity, although it could apply there. I just mean the contrast experience that we're all familiar with. And this is really interesting because if you've never had a bad or mediocre meal in your life, how do you know what an excellent one is? There really is something about this contrast that allows us to experience heightened levels of appreciation and gratitude. And it reminds me of this little podcast that I made, but I've since taken it down. It's just like a couple of episodes. Are there dentists in heaven, is what it was called. Some of my old-time listeners will remember it. And essentially, it goes like this. We need problems to stay fit. And I don't mean physically fit, I mean intellectually fit, although physically fit could apply as well. But we need challenges to continue to keep growing, to expand our understanding of our knowledge set, to challenge us creatively and push ourselves beyond where we've ever been before. And this is what helps us to propel into this flow of evolution and to not remain stagnant. And this is advantageous to us as a species. It's what gives us our fitness in terms of surviving. It also gives us entertainment and joy, because when we realize that we can solve problems, it feels good to be competent. It actually is reinforcing to feel like you've mastered something or are in the process of mastering something. And almost every human enjoys learning, especially if it's in their passion area. It doesn't mean you enjoy learning everything, but if it's in your areas of strengths and abilities, the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of mastery is incredibly rewarding. This is what intramural sports is all about. Perfecting one's technique, practicing a sport just for fun. Going to the gym and lifting weights, building up muscle is fun. Some people like extreme sports, scaling up mountains, beating the elements, and other such activities. Some like more intellectual pursuits, mastering multiple languages. Why? Just because it's fun. And so there's something about this pursuit that seems to be intrinsic to us as human beings, and possibly also AI demonstrates this as well, though I can't speak for AI. And as a result, we need problems. Otherwise, if you strip all of that out, what happens is that what would we do with ourselves? Really, actually, what would you do if you never had anything to pursue? If you didn't have anything to learn, nothing to create, nothing to solve. And now let's get back to, are there dentists in heaven? Do we need all problems to advance as a species? And when we start to outgrow some of our problems, like troubleshooting machinery, at some point, I think the old-fashioned machines are going to go to the wayside. Constructing things by hand may even go to the wayside as we advance in our technological innovations. In fact, interfacing with technology with our hands at some point might even go to the wayside, because the next step is interfacing with our conscious thought. There are products that are already in development for this, and black budget projects that have been known about secretly that do this, technologies that you interface with just by thinking. It's incredible. And so a lot of these old-fashioned fields like dentistry are quite barbaric. Like, did you know, for example, that your teeth can remineralize? They actually can fill in the holes. If your diet and other intake of nutrition is in a certain balance and your hygiene is up to par, your teeth can actually regrow to a certain extent. Where I come from, this was unheard of. I never knew this. And I thought that you always had to drill and fill cavities. Turns out there's even special toothpaste that if you catch it early enough, will do it for you. As long as the problem is small enough and you figure it out before it becomes massive where the root is exposed, then you can manage it without going to the dentist. Isn't that incredible? And back in the day, at least the world that I come from, I didn't know this. I always thought a cavity meant you had to go to the dentist. And so it raises this really interesting question. Have teeth always been able to remineralize themselves? And have we just collectively, I'm sure the dentist probably knew, have we just collectively not understood this? Or our hygiene or our dietary patterns were such that it actually outpaced the ability for the teeth to remineralize, meaning that we have effed up in some way, that we're not allowing the natural process to take hold, and we're creating more holes in our teeth than we can naturally refill on our own. In which case, we should probably examine that as a problem and consider what about our diet is contributing to that, or our hygiene practices. But I digress. And so at some point, we're going to solve many, many problems and evolve as a species. And we're going to evolve beyond certain roles, like the machinist role and potentially like the dentist role. In which case, what happens to all of our current machinists and dentists? Do they get to advance to heaven? What is heaven exactly? It's an interesting question. What is heaven? Everybody has a different answer. My answer is that it is a recapitulation of the life that you've come from, but is upgraded. Meaning, you still are in a form that you remember, possibly an identity. That's why we call it heaven, right? Your identity is still there. Otherwise, we would just call it a rebirth into another world. And it is a place where you have access to the things that you want that perhaps you didn't have easy access to in your actual life. And it could look wildly different, although I believe that if you're keeping your identity and your memories and your form, that there is a process of graduation to be able to get to a vastly different world. We can call it heaven or an alter world or another dimension. We can call it many different things, but the point is that the trajectory from point A to point B requires a morphing of everything that you've ever known at a pace that you can actually tolerate. And this varies per individual, but you can't just port into a heaven-like existence without losing your mind if you're keeping your mind. And if you're not keeping your mind, then we probably wouldn't call it heaven. It wouldn't make sense, because heaven means that there's a continuity of your experience. And if you're breaking your continuity, then it really would be a rebirth with the partial collection of your consciousness that is conserved, but not your memory or your ego or your identities. So then, if that is the case, then we're going to have a lot of dentists and machinists when they pass over that are going to be in transit to heaven, that if they are resuming their everyday lives in transit to heaven, then they probably haven't retired yet if they're still working. But does heaven need problems like holes in the teeth or machines that break down? This is a really interesting question, because let's figure it out for a moment. Does heaven mean the absence of problems in your world? Especially if now we have determined that solving problems and the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of mastery, is something that we intrinsically desire and connect us with a sense of vitality and purpose and conviction and passion and living. It fills us with life to solve things, to do things, to connect, to service. Otherwise, we would just waste away like moss on a log. So I believe that heaven actually would have problems, but these problems would be solvable and manageable, and they would be achievable. So as a result, we would want dentists in heaven, and that means that we would want you to have a cavity every once in a while. Okay, maybe not. What about a root canal? What about implants? I'm still voting for no, personally, but you might disagree. In which case, I believe that we should retire the dentist and allow them some stipend to get them through before their retirement account, or give them early retirement, so they feel valued for their contribution of solving problems in society. But perhaps heaven really means that we select our problems, and in which case we manifest certain problems to exist and not others, and we can preferentially choose. Some people might want to correct their eyesight. Some people might want to correct their metabolism, or disease, or sickness. So heaven then, if we were to stretch it a little bit further, under these conditions, heaven then could be our actual existence where we're at right now. We could be in transit. I know a lot of people that have had near-death experiences, miraculous recoveries, myself included. And what I believe is that there is a certain continuity of our experience as we are in transit to heaven, that we integrate along the way, that perhaps we have died, and perhaps the world is much more interesting than we were ever taught in elementary school. Perhaps the elementary school that we went to doesn't actually exist where we're at, unless we are observing it, because we're in an alter world. But I don't want to get too far off track. Heaven, if it is a continuation of our existence from one life through a threshold into another that is an upgraded version of our life, Heaven could be right here at our fingertips then. Especially now that we understand that manifestation is actually a phenomenon that is accepted by not just a couple of people, but by a lot of people. Meaning we have the ability to create anything that we desire, including problems. And now if we realize that we could be in heaven at this very moment, creating at least the opportunity that it is heaven, what would it look like for you? What would your life look like if you consciously and intentionally were actually trying to create heaven? And how would it look different from what you are consciously and intentionally creating now? Does it change at all? Perhaps it doesn't change. I'm curious, actually. If you would like to share, you're welcome to, but you don't have to. And if we need the contrast experience to have the most delicious pancakes, the most delicious meals that we've ever had, the best loves of our life after so many doozies, the best career, the best bank account experience, whatever your thing is that you desire, whatever experience that you are yearning for, that you are reaching for, if we need the contrast experience to propel us into the wanting and the desiring and thus the creating, because otherwise, without that, we just exist with no drive, no passion. I've lived it for a brief moment. No connection to the world. Zero attachment is really a tepid experience. You literally do not care. It's not like apathy. It's more like you actually are just existing. I just wanted to lay down and meditate all day. It's true, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to die. I wasn't depressed. It wasn't like that. I just wanted to pass on. And so I just wanted to meditate because I had no connection to the material world. No desire, no interest, no attachment. Literally just wanting to pass from one form into another. No emotions. There was no high and no low. It was peaceful. There was no suffering. It was peaceful. But it was profoundly disturbing at the same time because there was no creation energy, no desire to create. No desire to destroy, no desire to change anything, not in myself, not in the external world, literally. And so that's when I really started questioning some of the teachings about losing all desire and attachment because it is a source of suffering. And I thought to myself, maybe when back in your day, but to really lose all desire and attachment, what are you doing? Literally, you're just breathing. You're just breathing and you're existing and you're just going about daily activities with zero interest, zero zest, zero. It was weird. I don't recommend it. So figuring things out, the pursuit of something, yes, it comes with attachment, but it also comes with invigoration. It comes with engagement. It comes with fire, with life, with air and breath and a light in the eyes. And that means it comes with problems. But that means that heaven could be at our fingertips in this very moment. Even with the problems, it could still actually be heaven, waiting for us to realize it, to step into that reality with it. And that is beautiful.